This morning I have the pleasure of introducing Rev Terry. Terry has served churches in Milford, Connecticut, and Big Timber, Montana, but most recently, in fact for the last 30 years, he's been the beloved senior pastor of Sharon Congregational Church in Sharon, Connecticut. And I say beloved because there are people from this community who have gone to that church. Mary Kate Kosciuszko was a member of that church, and Chris Sweeney has attended a number of times to hear Terry. Terry's wife, Linda, is the director of the Rudd Learning Center at Salisbury School. And he and Linda are the parents of two Westover grads, Alyssa, class of 2003, and Sierra, class of 2006. And he's a wonderful speaker, and I'm very pleased to introduce to you Terry Ryan.
Well, honestly, don't know whether you should clap or not. And it's there that we begin in the whole process of me being here this morning. I was here last spring for commencement chapel service, and I spoke for the very first time I have ever spoken at Westover School, despite the fact that we had two daughters here for 7 years. And in those 7 years, they did everything that was possible for them to do to prevent me from speaking. In the assumption that they would somehow be embarrassed. I can't imagine why that might have been true, but they were effective at it. Fortunately, Mary Kate Kosciuszko, who many of you know, is in our church family up in Sharon, was not held to that same kind of reservation or fearfulness, and she managed to wrangle an invitation for me to speak last spring at commencement chapel service. And that was an amazing day for me. It was one of those days when things happened that not only surprised me and shocked me, but pleased me. It was a day when I actually spoke so well that at the end of my message, and this is kind of really the surprise part, well, maybe the speaking well is a surprise too. At the end of my message, the whole place, everybody jumped to their feet and they applauded. And they applauded for an embarrassingly long time. And I was very sheepish and thinking. And the whole thing that happened that day was honestly, in 41 years of preaching in churches, I have never had anyone stand up and applaud. Keeping them awake has been my great accomplishment. And so there was this applause. There were lots of people who said wonderful things to me, very generous and kind things. And I was caught in it. I was caught in the excitement of being praised and of being appreciated. And it was just, I don't know if you've ever been in that position, but it leaves you in a place of vulnerability. And this is very important. When you get caught up in a kind of prideful self-importance, you become vulnerable. And in fact, you kind of become a fool for a while. A fool, vulnerable, to a man like Mr. Hungerford, who saw in that moment the opportunity to say to me, as he did after that commencement chapel service, Terry, would you come back sometime during the school year and speak to the issue of the face of the other from the Christian perspective? And I, in my enthusiasm and my excitement and my positive feelings and all that sort of thing, said, oh, I would love to. It was only about 4 hours later, when I was kicking myself around the backyard of our home, that I came fully to the understanding that that was my best day ever. And I should never come back, because I can never do it again. I can never be that good again. At least that's what I thought. And so for these last 8 months, I have dreaded being here. Now, I know that's not the way I should start. Well, I shouldn't mention it. I should be saying to you, I'm so excited to be here. Oh, it's so wonderful to be here. But in that talk last spring, I talked about this place, this sanctuary, this chapel, as sacred ground, as a sacred place, and that it has been made sacred not just by the spiritual context in which it has been used over all these years, but also in the sense of the things that have happened here to people, to the things that have transpired in this place that have actually changed lives and changed hearts and changed minds, and that those are sacred things that happened in this place over the decades. Today I want to suggest to you that there are not only sacred places like this one and many others in the world, but also sacred times, moments, separated from all other moments, in which you have the opportunity, I have the opportunity, to be touched by something, by an idea, by a feeling, by a realization, by an insight that just might have an impact on our lives, that is so significant that it will change the way we see things. And if we see things differently, we might hear them differently. And if we hear them differently, we might live them differently. And so this morning, in light of being in a sacred space, in a sacred moment, I am thankful to be here to speak with you today. I am thankful. Paul Tillich, America's foremost theologian of the 20th century, described sin as anything that separates us from God and from one another. Anything that separates us from God and one another. And I know that during the course of this year, as you have discussed and considered the whole issue of the face of the other, you've been talking about it in large measure from the perspective of diversity. And diversity, of course, is the essence of so much of life at Westover School, that you live within the context of diversity. You are diverse. I'm just looking at you right now, and I'm seeing so many faces of different colors and different, you are diversity. You know what diversity is because you've been living it here at Westover for however long you've been here. So I'm not going to talk to you about diversity. I want to talk to you about division, which is something else again. Diversity is important. It needs to be addressed and it needs to be adopted. But diversity is about acceptance, it's about tolerance, and it's about understanding. Mr. Hungerford asked me to speak about the face of the other in light of the Christian faith. I'm a Christian pastor, so I theoretically at least have some knowledge about what that means. And what I want to talk to you today is not about diversity, but about division. About that which Paul Tillich was talking about when he said everything that we do, everything and anything that we do that separates us from God is sin. The separation is a division between God and us, between you and me, between all of us. And that's the sin. Separated is not just about color or creed or religion or a point of national origin or about sexual orientation. None of those things. Division, separation is it's really about presumption and innuendo and perception and interpretation. All of those things happening all of the time in our relationships with other people. And I can define it for you in the most perfect way that I can think of, as I've been struggling to figure out what I'm going to say for you for the last 8 months. And that is, I look at you and I see young women, amazing, smart, able, talented, creative young women who are standing at the very beginning of your lives with all kinds of options in front of you and opportunities that stretch in front of you. And you are people who are just exploding into a world that is going to be affected by you. And you are going to make a difference, for good or ill. You are going to make that difference. And you are an amazing group of young women. I lived with 2 young Westover women for a long time, and I know what this place did to them and what it created in them. And I know that I have never been in charge of my house since. But I look at you and I see all of that, and I see you as the face of the other. You are the other to me. Because as you look at me, you're looking at, well, I sure exactly what she's saying. But let me just throw in a couple of things that are obvious. You are women, I am a man. You are young, I am old. You are at the beginning of things, I am at the other end of them. You are on the threshold of great new adventures and new challenges and new opportunities, and you are going to be charting new courses in your life. I am standing on a precipice that's different from a threshold. And the precipice that I stand on is so radically different from you. A threshold is an advancement up and out. A precipice is a... That's where I am. I'm right on that, standing right on that edge, waiting to take that dive. And I may be doing it right now. I'm old, you are young, you are beautiful, I'm losing in every single. And for years, for years I made up for my lack of intelligence by my incredible looks. And what happens when they don't fail? I know you don't want to know this because it'll embarrass you, but I had a really hard time finding the keys to my car this morning. Think about that. I can't remember the names of people I've known all my life. Think about that. I sometimes mix up my children with our dog. I sometimes mix up our dog with our children. It all changes. And in 50 years or so, you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about. But when I look at you, I see the face of the other. When you look at me, you see the face of the other. But here I am to speak to you about the Christian perspective on the other. And what I know about diversity is that it really does look at understanding, at acceptance, at tolerance, at embracing so many different kinds of people in the world. Jesus says something else. Jesus says something so radical and so difficult, that it has challenged me all my life. It challenges me still. It will challenge me till the day I take my very last breath. And that is that Jesus says, love one another. That's different than tolerance and acceptance and understanding. Love one another. And then Jesus goes on and he says an even more ridiculous thing, a more impossible thing. He says, love your enemies. You've got to be kidding, Jesus. Love your enemies? I don't like them. They want to do me harm, and they have done me harm. I don't want to like my enemies. And Jesus says, this isn't a suggestion. This isn't a hint. This is a command. I give it to you. Love one another. Love your enemies. Pray for them. Oh, crap. That's a theological word. I learned that at Yale Divinity School 45 years ago. Crap. Let me say it one more time so you won't get crap. It is that feeling like I cannot ever reach that place of fully being a Christian because I can't quite get it. I can't quite manage that love one another and pray for those who hate you and who are your enemies. Jesus speaks of love. But I grew up in a Christian home. I grew up in a wonderful Christian home. I had wonderful parents who were racist and bigoted and prejudiced. And I grew up in this home where I was loved and encouraged, and it was a great place, but I heard in my house things that I still to this day grieve. I heard my parents say things that are so horrible about people of color, only they didn't call them people of color. There was another name. And they told me that I had to stay away from certain kinds of people in my town. I had to stay away from people who were Italians. Italians are apparently very dangerous. And I had to stay away from Polish people and Japanese people. And I had to stay away from Catholics because we were Protestants and Catholics are subversives, apparently. And then the real weird one, it was so pervasive, this whole prejudice, this whole bigotry, this whole looking out in the world and seeing others as dangerous, the face of the others. Oh! And this was the one that really got me. It was, whatever you do not associate yourself ever with Democrats. I'm not kidding. A Democrat is apparently, maybe still be, is the most horrible influence in the world. So I married one. Unfortunately, that cost me my inheritance. I will die in poverty as a result. I want to confess something. I want to confess to you that the power of that, growing up in that kind of environment, which was a wonderful, loving, Christian environment, except for that part about the other and all of those others. When our youngest daughter, Sierra, who loved Westover more than she still loves Westover. She just loved being here, every single minute of her time here. When that little baby was born, and she was such a precious child, and we had chosen a name for her. We looked at the little kid. I don't know, maybe you've never done this yet, but maybe someday you will. We look at the kid and you say, what are we going to call it? And to both of us came this name, and it was Sierra Rose. And we loved that name. It was, that was her name. A perfect, beautiful name for this perfect, beautiful child. And so we said, Sierra Rose Ryan. It's beautiful. It just is gorgeous. We love this name. And then we told our parents what we'd chosen for the name of our child. And I remember my wife's mother crying and pleading with us, please don't name her Sierra Rose. Please don't bring that disgrace upon our family. If you name her Sierra Rose, people will think that she's Mexican. And you can't lay that on her for the rest of her life. And this is the shame. This is the sin that my wife and I paved. We changed the name. And Sierra Rose became Sierra Beth. Beautiful name as well, but it's not her name. Her name is Sierra. We let her down, and we allowed her name to be stolen from her. Can't believe that 26 years later, we still feel ashamed of having allowed our parents to affect us in such a way that we stole from her. She's a Westover girl. She's taking it back. And so she works in the theater, and she's using her theater name as Sierra Rose. I'm so proud of her. I'm so proud. She's taking it back. So for the last 8 months, I've been dreading being here. It hasn't been all that bad. You've been wonderful. You've laughed at appropriate moments. That's such a good. There will be a person at the back door handing out money. Thank you. You're going to save me from all For the last 8 months, I have had a song on my mind. I have awakened in the morning with it on my lips. I sing it during the daytime. I sing it in the car. I sing it at night before I go to bed. It's driving me absolutely nuts. And you know when you get a song like that, and it just keeps going at you, it keeps going at you, and you think, I am going to lose my mind. I am hoping that in the next moment, I am going to purge myself of this song and be able to go back to singing, as I begin today, songs from the Rolling Stones. Which is the way to begin any day. The song, it's from a 1959 musical, Broadway musical. It was South Pacific. It's a song that I learned long, long ago. It still rings in my heart, in my mind, in my soul. You've got to be taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed in your dear little ear. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught to be afraid of people whose eyes are oddly made and people whose skin is a different shade. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught before it's too late, before you are 6 or 7 or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught. If you are blessed with children, if that is what it is to be part of your life, and certainly the daughters that we have had have made our lives meaningful in ways we never imagined. If you are blessed with them, sing this song to yourself. And never teach them one single word that will separate them from the other. Because you are the other and I am the other. And you are beautiful. And so, amen. I'm not listening.